How do we find ourselves? The formalities that year were already taking too long in her opinion, as Nasuada's speech was more prolific than usual. By taking a glance around the big dining hall, Arya could tell the others shared the same thought. Nar-Garsvog's head, for instance, started to bend slightly forward, which was never a good sign. Angela, at the table opposite to the leaders, curled her hair around her finger. By the herbalist's side, Elva had a lost stare, and Solumbum licked his claws in pure boredom. Arya looked to her left side. Eragon drummed his fingers on the arms of his chair, which was annoying her by the minute. Very discreetly, she brought a finger to stop his movement, placing it on top of his hand. At the contact, his eyes darted to her, and he seemed to perceive what he was doing, throwing her an apologetic look and a smile. It took her to the morning they had together, before he had to go back to the mountain and finish preparing for receiving the Eastern guests. That was when he showed her the garden, if she were another woman, and if she dared to say, a human lady or a typical elf, she would have hated it, or disliked it to say the least. But she was her, and he knew her well. Arya would never tire to think or say that. She loved it. It was rough, unfinished, wild. He had 10 years to craft it in a way that it would look like a masterpiece, painted by the hands of the most talented artisan. To make it to perfection, Eragon was fully capable of doing so. But it was for her, and he knew she would want to take part in building it too, and seeing the nature take its own course. It was obvious that he had cleared the soil before planting the flowers, but it was also obvious he had only trimmed the native plants that had grown naturally among the ones he planted after that, without pulling it out of the ground completely or using magic to preventing them from coming back. She had chanted a quick spell to inspect the use of magic on the place, because she could feel it deep in the ground but too faintly on the surface, and discovered he had sung for fertility and for healthy growth, but decided to let the seasons decide the course nature should take. She appreciated his respect for the imperfection of life. In the end, it was a well-planned chaos. After showing her the house and sitting by her side on the balcony, Eragon stood up and led her around the terrace until they were standing on the opposite side of the tree. From up there, Arya could smell the strong aroma of flowers rising from the garden. She raised her chin and took a deep breath, closing her eyes to identify the different scents, although there was a predominant one that smothered the existence of all others. She smiled and felt his hand involving hers. "I'm glad it's summer," she commented with merriment as she let out the air, knowing it was time for white lilies. "I thought you would like the smell." "Come, you'll find the colors just as enticing." He was right. If the summer lilies were powerful in smell, the other flowers were stunning in colors. She could already see it from up there, between a branch or two. They climbed down a narrow staircase that followed the curvature of the house until they were stepping on the garden, and she realized that there was no separation between the two of them, and the big tree where the house was sung into formed a gigantic high shelter for all the growth underneath it. "There are the lilies you already recognized." Eragon started to walk on the pathway formed with pebbles, pointing at the rows of flowers, some close by, some at a distance. "The lilacs, of course, the gardenia." He kept going, walking ahead, while she was still delighted by the first ones he mentioned. The pathway didn't follow an obvious direction. It seemed to her that as the plants were growing, the need to reach further and keep tending to them grew as well, so the trail kept on going. And then more trees were sung, and more flowers were planted, so the trail continued, tortuous, curvilinear, deep in the pleasure of fresh air under the hot summer weather. Smaller trails would branch out from the bigger one, making her wonder how extensive was the garden, or should her say the woods. Her eyes were being greeted with so many colors, it was hard to keep track. Sometimes a long row of red would predominate, but then a little ahead down the path it would mix with yellow, orange, purple, just to end at another row, but of a different color this time. Not only the flowers were summery and colorful, but the ground was coated with fallen fruits of all sorts, some she couldn't even recognize. She looked up to see the fruit trees, providing a true feast for the birds who sang and hummed all around. Arya halted when a rustle of leaves started from behind a bush and moved quickly from one to another. She looked ahead to ask Eragon about it, but he had already disappeared in the middle of the vines hanging from the trees. Arya extended her consciousness to touch the minds of such living creatures and found two kittens playing with each other. She expanded her mind a little further and touched the minds of an entire family of house cats living in the garden and so many other small animals, as expected, but big ones too. That surprised her. She noticed Eragon was in company of them, so she rushed to meet him down the path and found him petting a big white stallion. Two other horses were grazing in the grass around the end of the pathway that led to a little square with a bench. "Are they wild?" Arya asked. Eragon pondered and sat on the bench, stretching his legs ahead. In a way. They were born in the wilderness, but chose to take shelter here as many other animals did. Now they help us in the same way the elven horses do in Do Weldenvarden, but their communication is still very primitive. "Why do they help you?" She went to sit by his side. "I'm not sure, like I said, their communication is primitive, but I think they enjoy this place. Before there was nothing here, only a few sparse trees by the river, as you may remember. In the summer, the sun can be cruel, and there was nowhere to hide. So, I believe they help us out of gratitude. There's also food here now." He pointed at the grass the big animals were nibbling on. Those were great reasons to be grateful for. She could agree with that. She was grateful for a lot less essential things than shelter and food. Taking his hand in hers once again, Arya wished him to know how much she appreciated his care, but she didn't have words or actions that could express it right. All she could do was to hope he would understand from the comfort of her touch. Nasuada's speech had finally come to an end, and she declared the opening feast for the Anga Games commenced. From the kitchens, an army of men and women carrying platters and platters of food served the tables around the hall without distinctions of social ranks, and that was probably what Arya liked the most about having the games there. Everyone was treated the same. The servers for the night would be served the night after. Who cleaned the tables one day would rest the next day, in a rotation system that was fair and honest for the residents of the mountain. Soon, the voices were loud and cheerful, and children would be seen running between the tables. When the bellies were well fed, the ale started to pour with more abundance and music to be played next to the leader's table. Some people kicked their chairs back and formed an animated dancing party. The elves lent their silky voices to the songs played by the human bards and dwarf musicians, and soon the Urgles brought their drums to the mix. The dragons were humming loud to the beat, what caused the entire room to vibrate in synchronicity to the songs. It was a true Eastern celebration. Arya sighed and relaxed her shoulders, sitting back in her chair. She could get used to it. Eragon leaned into her and announced he was going to be with his family and asked if she wished to come along. She politely refused in order to allow him to have some alone time with Roran and Katrina, who he hadn't seen in 20 years. Besides, his niece Ismira and nephew Ian were practically strangers, being the only interactions between them via scrying over the years. Arya wished to grant him that time. He acquiesced and walked toward their table. She quietly enjoyed the music, reminiscing the smell of flowers. It had been a minute since she had caught his hand, and the words had been stuck in her throat. She turned to look at him, and a ray of sun pierced through the leaves to hit her in the eye, blinding her momentarily. Arya adjusted her head to rid herself from the luminosity, and found Eragon's eyes locked on hers, and his lips slightly parted as he was captivated about the way she looked. His expression seemed silly, and she couldn't suppress a laugh. It was impossible for her to know if it was the sound or the look of it, but his dazzled expression intensified. She let go of his hand to run her fingers softly on the side of his face. "Why are you looking at me like that? It seems we've never met before." Eragon gulped and resisted the urge to close his eyes to her touch. Sometimes, when I think I'm immune to your beauty, you do something that makes me feel exactly like the first time. She wondered what she had done to gain such reaction from him, but it felt good to be the object of his praise. You are not bad on the eyes either. Her gaze followed the line traced by her fingers down his well-defined jaw, and she almost missed when his eyebrows rose. Didn't he know he looked good? You seem surprised. Eragon cleared his throat and tried to compose himself, but a light shade of pink tainted his cheeks. You have never said something like that to me before. I didn't know. Don't you know how good you look? I don't know how good you think I look. Arya stopped her hand on his neck and stared at his eyes. She saw he was trying his best to keep the eye contact through the embarrassment. I guess I don't pay you enough compliments, do I? He relaxed and smiled gently, as to dismiss her from the duty of praising him as well. You don't have to. He grabbed her hand that rested on his neck and pulled her up. Come on, there's more to see. Looking back to that moment, Arya would punish herself thinking she had missed a chance to tell him everything she thought of him, or at least one good thing. To say that for her there was no comparison, he was the most attractive man she knew. There were fairest men, more elegant and refined, but she wouldn't look at them twice if the alternative was Eragon. If she was hesitant to compliment his looks, then she should at least praise his dedication and creativity, or any of his many qualities, anything but let the moment pass. But she let it pass. Crossed the little square, the pathway resumed, but not for long, and this time he let her go first, guiding her by the waist. Again, I don't know if I have crossed a line with this too, so if I have, I'm profoundly sorry. Eragon started to explain, which sounded apprehensive and odd to Arya's ears. I just wish you to know that I accept all of you, and I agree with your opinion that this one is the most perfect and lovely flower that have ever existed. I couldn't exclude it from your garden, just for pure jealousy. I'm not even sure I'm jealous of him. Arya moved away some vines to see a single black morning glory resting on a bed of spotted dead nettle. Her heart clenched. She looked back, but Eragon had turned on his heels and walked away. She was alone with the flower that Fairlin had once created just for her in a solstice many years before, so many miles away from there. Her knees went weak, and she knelt in front of that exuberance, with conflicted feelings stirring inside of her. The high-pitched tone of the flute made her want to join the dancers that were many at that point. Fernan helped Vance and Thorn to move the giant tables aside, and soon there were more people joining the dance than watching from the sidelines. Arya watched as Avelina dodged the swirling pairs and groups that drunkenly moved through the hall to make her way to the Queen, and with a casual courtesy, invited her to join the dance. It was the last incentive Arya needed. The repetitive verses of the song enticed the crowd to sing along, muffling the voices of the elven singers, what didn't bother them at all, as she noticed. The stamping feet and clapping hands followed the beat of the drums, and it created an extra pulse in her chest, almost making her body to move involuntarily. She let out a laugh when she remembered how the festivities in the kingdom used to be, and how outraged the aristocrats that had never set foot in Anga would feel if they saw their kings and queens surrendered to such popular activity. That night, she was completely surrendered, conflicted feelings aside.